Welcome to Intermediate Clothes Mending Techniques. My name is Mary Yogi, and I'm a librarian with LA County Library, and I'll be your host today. So the grant that we received to support this program was for a new pilot program at LA County Library. It's a tool lending library. Recently, we launched 5 tool lending libraries at Compton Library, Norwalk, Lancaster, Rosemead, and San Fernando Library. In addition to drills, power washers, hammers, levels, cake pans, and a stud finder, we have some sewing tools in the collection, including a sewing machine, garment steamer, fabric scissors, and more. Please note that the tools must be checked out and returned to one of the tool lending library locations. To learn more about that and to see a catalog of our tools, you can visit lacountylibrary.org/tools, and I'll be putting that in the chat later. So now it's my pleasure to introduce you to our instructor today, Catherine Siraboyarsky. Catherine has taught visual arts and technology for over 20 years and currently teaches clothing and art classes and moderates the Maker Club at Bishop Amat High School. She has an MFA in studio arts and grew up with a mom who sewed wedding dresses, stuffed animals, clothing, and more. Inspired by her experience with textiles, Catherine took sewing classes in high school and later integrated these skills into her sculptural works. We'd like to welcome back everyone who attended our first meeting, or our first webinar, which was Basic Clothes Mending. The YouTube video of that webinar, it's 53 minutes, is available on the LA County Library YouTube channel, and I'll be putting a link to that in the chat as well. So now I'd like to turn it over to Catherine and let her take it away. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Mary, and good morning, everybody. It's great to have a lot of you, I think, from last time signing up again. And if you're new, then hopefully it's pretty easy to pick up where we left off. Last time we just talked about the basics of simple mending, and then now we're going to build on that. So first thing, hopefully you have some things you can work with, like needle, thread, some kind of scrapped fabric. So if you don't have that, maybe try to grab that. And then I'm going to get started here. This is intermediate clothes mending. And there's actually quite a bit of history connected with with clothes mending. So I think you'll be interested to hear about that. So first of all, like I said, if you can get, these are ideal, I'm sure you may not have all of these, but for these projects, you want to have you could use a regular needle, but you'll mostly be using larger needles like an upholstery needle or what's called a Sashiko needle, which is a Japanese tradition that we're going to talk about shortly. You'll need to use a thicker thread like embroidery thread, or there's special thread also for Sashiko technique. Scissors, fabric scraps, or patches. So you could also just, you can use fabric scraps like you see here to make your patches, or you could buy even iron-on patches and iron them on and then do the decorative stitching that goes with it. Okay. All right, so historically, visible mending was not a glamorous, fashion trend thing. It was part of poor people actually used it more as like a functional purpose to patch and repair their clothing because they couldn't afford to buy new garments or fabrics. So you see like a lot of laborers, like farm workers or other, like maybe shepherds, people like that would be needing to keep mending their clothes to make them last. Okay, so here's some contemporary examples of visible mending. So using darning, embroidery, or patchwork. We're not going to talk as much about darning this time, and darning is I'll show you in a moment an example that relates to that, but it's basically following the weave of the fabric, and so you're just trying to match that. But this is a visible darning where you're not just going with the weave, but you're actually allowing the repair to show, so it looks decorative. The middle one is sewing on these patches. And then the second one here is actually doing stitches that create patterns themselves and like a decorative look. Okay, so this is what visible darning is. It's we went over this talking about darning socks last time. So you're going to be weaving it. You create one row vertically, and then you're weaving back through it with a horizontal stitch. And then also, so it's often using the woven pattern. Swiss darning would be using like a braided pattern. So if you think of a sweater, and if you really look at the pattern, a lot of times it's like a braided pattern. So you'd be going back over that or mimicking that braided look with the Swiss darning. We're not going to talk a lot about that today, since it is a little more complex technique. So I'm gonna, hopefully you can just have fun with this today and get inspired to do lots of cheery, fun things on your clothes, like jeans, for example. Okay. So as far as historically, there's also another tradition, which I'm not going to be talking a lot about, but it's called kanta, and it's a traditional hand stitching that originated in Southeast Asia. And that was used for holding lots of layers of fabric together to make one larger piece of usable cloth. And these layers are often remnants of saris that are no longer wearable. So again, it's a way of preserving fashion instead of reproducing, right? But they were doing it more for utilitarian reasons to make things last. So that traditionally they were doing that. Okay, so, whoops. I just realized I missed one image here. So, but this is actually, it's okay because it's kind of a combination. You can see, so Sashiko is the stitching, decorative stitching. And so you can create all sorts of patterns, and there's actual stencils that you can get to copy the patterns. But you know, you could draw your own, come up with your own pattern and use something like, excuse me, like a fabric chalk or pen to draw your design all over, and then use it to stitch over and then wash it out. So boro is, I'll talk about that more in one slide ahead, but boro is more the patching. So you can see this could be part of the boro here, which is layers of fabric patched together, whereas the sashiko is decorative stitching. Okay, so boro is, again, it comes from Japan. And so the main source that a lot of people are getting this, the visible mending method or decorative stitching is coming from the tradition in Japan. And then these are the two main traditions. Boro or boromono means rags in Japanese, refers to the clothing and textiles produced in rural northern Japan by repeatedly patching and mending clothes to extend its lifespan. It's closely tied with a philosophy of motanai, a respect and regret for anything that has to be wasted, and was born of economic and environmental hardship. Stitches can be as simple as running stitches, like you can see here in this pretty old sample, varying length, although other stitches were also used for boro. Modern boro-inspired work can incorporate other sashiko patterns or follow the designs on the fabric patches. So a lot of the older examples that I came across were more very simplistic stitching, like just functional, I guess you'd say. And then over time, it seemed like they started to develop more unique and decorative patterns. So you can see this is an old kimono that's patched with these patches and then the stitching. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between the boro and the sashiko because boro also uses a lot of stitching, even though it's patching. So here is some examples of boro. And you can see there's the decorative stitch, and hopefully you don't feel too intimidated to start this because it definitely is more for having fun doing this, like enjoying it, getting enjoyment out of it rather than worrying about doing perfect stitches and perfect patterns. And then, so you see on the right here, what I'm going to talk about in a minute is called a blanket stitch. So it's a patch surrounded by a blanket stitch. And then here's sort of a pattern with the stitching. So Sashiko originated, you can see these beautiful patterns that have been developed out of it, originated about 400 years ago as a means of keeping warm and preserving clothing. In rural northern Japan, winters were harsh and many people were extremely poor. Many of the popular traditional sashiko patterns are actually simplified representations of things found in nature, such as plants, birds, animals, or natural phenomena, such as clouds or rising steam. So you can see the traditional patterns. And I found online too, I think I included it with the links at the end of this. There's a site you can go to that has a huge amount of resources if you wanted to copy these exact traditional Japanese patterns, you can buy these actual stenciled sheets that you can copy onto your fabric and then stitch those. But again, I like this example in the middle because you can see, I'm guessing this person kind of made up a pattern, but they created a really nice look. It almost has like a Van Gogh texture to it. And then on the right here, you can say this could be the jean leg here, the light part. And then you have the dark patch behind it with a blanket stitch there to finish off the edge. And then just this sort of a basting or a flat stitch around it to create a pattern and also create strength on the material. Okay, so how to do sashiko, a couple things. Well, one thing they say, which I'll show you a sample in a moment, is you cut out a hole in where the fabric is frayed, so you get a clean shape. Then you put your patch behind it, and then you'd be stitching over it. See? And then these stitches, so relies on the running stitch, and it's made by inserting the needle through the fabric, loading several stitches onto the needle at once before pulling it through. And then this maximizes the length of your needle and results in a line of straight, evenly spaced stitches. However, this can be used to stitch the outline of a circle, square, triangle, or any other shape. All right, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you my samples, and then hopefully, I wish I could see what you all are doing there. Hopefully some of you are able to follow along with me and do your own samples. All right, so here's the first thing. I took, like a pair of kids' uniform pants, and they had a really two worn out holes in the knees. So here's just some example of what the boro stitching could look like on it as a way to strengthen it. And then I also have another sample here, which has the blanket stitch, which is actually, it's a fun stitch. It looks complex, but it's really easy. I'll show you. But it's also really helpful because it will prevent the fabric from fraying. And then with both of these, what you do is the inside of the pants. So you would first inside, you would put a patch in there and pin it. Well, actually, first I would say you would trim out the inside where the fabric is frayed, so you get a cleaner shape. And then the inside, you would put the patch, okay, and then you just pin it on there, or if it's an iron-on, you could iron on the patch, and then you do this blanket stitch around it. Now I'm using black, of course, because I want you to be able to see it, but you might want to choose like a beige thread if you could. So I'll show you here how to do the blanket stitch. I forgot to say also, when you're getting your thread with this thicker thread today, you can just use a single thread. You don't have to double it. And someone asked me last time about beeswax. You could use beeswax to smooth your thread. That works. I usually just wet my finger and then wet the thread. What else could you do? You could clip it with a scissors if that's easier. So the way you do the blanket stitch is the distance you want the stitch to go back, you just put your needle there. It's going to come out here. Okay. And then as you're pulling the thread through, you make sure to put your needle back through that loop. Okay. And then once it's going through the loop, then you're going to pull it. See, and then it makes the little pattern there. So again, you go through this spot and then thread it back through the loop. I have a little bit of a short thread here, so you wouldn't have a longer thread. I noticed with the blanket stitch, you really want to make sure to have a long enough thread because it uses quite a bit of thread compared to, the running stitch. It's easier to keep track of how much thread you have. So, and again, the running stitches, they were used to strengthen the fabric overall. So they they would put a patch on, but then they would do this running stitches over it. And so different examples, excuse me, bumped the screen. Different examples that I saw would have both. They would have like a piece of fabric with stitching, with more fabric with stitching. So it was a lot of density, which also created warmth for the colder temperatures. So, okay, so I'm
Can I
going
just ask you a question real quick?
Yeah.
So when you're doing that blanket stitch, are you going through the fabric, the patch,
Oh yeah.
just the fabric? Can you kind of go over that again?
Yeah. You know, either you could do either way. I actually wasn't going through both. I was just going through here, the first layer of fabric, because it's really more important. Whoops, this thread is getting very frayed here. Let me just undo that. It's really more important to use this stitch to keep the fabric from fraying. But then, yeah, if it's not an iron-on patch, then you could use it you could go all the way through to attach it. Otherwise, later on, you could go around. You can, again, with all these things, it's up to you how you want to make it look and what techniques you want to use. But you could do a running stitch just around the outside too later to put them together. So. And I'm going to show you another example that I have with blanket stitch. So I will show you one more time when I also have more thread on that one too. So
Great,
there's
thanks.
those examples. So the next thing is the Sashiko technique, which is the patches, right? So this is the extra fun part. So actually this is a little, for some reason, it's not quite as colorful as mine is, but I have a lavender thread here. So I just used a whip stitch on the sides. You can use any style of stitch on these patches, but you can use that to attach it. What I did though, see I have this other patch here. So what I did is, I didn't know if I wanted to have you all do this whole process because it was kind of long, but basically with this circle shape, I basted it around the circle. So I did quick wide stitches, and then I had it like this, and then I put it, then what you can do is you do another basting stitch or wide stitch around it to hold that down. Then you stitch it on with a whip stitch. That's what I did. And then you take out all those basting stitches. So that's just a way of, you know, sewing down these sort of little hems on the edges and then putting it on there. So you can also do another stitch, which they do a lot with like appliques or quilting, where you, instead of doing something like a whip stitch, you could do a stitch that's invisible along the edges if you wanted to look, you know, perfectly clean and like a little puffy dot on there, let's say. It's another idea. All right, and let's go back to the blanket stitch now. Okay, so here's another jeans one that I have. And then the blanket stitch again, you can, so you decide which direction you're going. And when you get started, you just push the, you know, when you start the whole thing, you just push the needle underneath the fabric and wherever you want to start, and then pull it up, and your knot would be underneath there. And then you'd start from there. I have to go back. I just made a mistake here. I'll leave this one here for. I'm going to try to imitate the whip stitch. The whip stitch, it's like a back stitch. So maybe in a moment, I'll just switch the stitching on the Pikachu here, and then you can see the different methods. Okay, so one more, I'll do a couple of blanket stitches to review how to do that. So you've got your thread here. You're gonna go, I'm actually gonna start, let's see. Let me go this direction. Okay, so you're going to bring the needle down as low as you want your stitch, and then bring it back up right near the edge of your patch. And then see, here comes the loop. And then as the loop comes down, you just bring the needle back through the loop. Okay. And then that's what creates that little bar at the top. You'll notice you probably have blankets around your house to have this stitch on them. And you could use this for making your blanket. Okay, so again, figure out where you want the stitch to start. Bring it back up near the top. So that's pretty simple. And then you just need to remember to bring the needle back through the loop. Kind of a long thread here. Okay, so maybe I will show you another idea. So hopefully some of you are able to try something at home right now with this, and then I can maybe answer any questions at the end. What you do with the back stitch is you just you find a spot and then you go ahead a little bit underneath your patch and then come back up where you want your stitch to start on the patch. And again, sometimes it can be a little tricky to keep it in a straight line, so you kind of have to watch that to try to not do things too unevenly. But again, you know, this isn't, you don't have to be perfect with this. You just do whatever you think looks nice and you have fun doing. So that's the back stitch. And then there's another stitch you can do once you hem your, so like once you hem this patch, then you could, let's say, stitch it on along here with a flat stitch, which would also hold down the sides or the hem on the edges, and then also attach it onto the jeans. So I'll show you that in a moment too.
Catherine, can I ask you a couple of questions about this one?
Yeah.
Can you show the back side of the stitching?
Oh, yeah. Right.
That would be great. And then you're using embroidery floss, is that correct?
Yeah, I'm using embroidery floss because I figured most people probably wouldn't have the Sashiko thread.
Right. Okay. And then and you're using an embroidery or a Sashiko needle?
Yeah, and they suggested also an upholstery needle. So I think that these are wider. The one I'm using is a Sashiko needle. So I ordered on Amazon, but I know I came across some really good sites that I'm pretty sure I posted in the link. There's a site that has every material you need for Sashiko and all the patterns or transfers that you could use too.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, this one.
Do you have a recommendation on whether the blanket stitch or the whip stitch is better, or is it just an appearance kind of thing?
I think it's just the look of it. Yeah.
Okay.
And then, yeah, so this one, obviously it doesn't actually have a hole in the leg, but you can imagine if there was a hole there, this is where you could put it over the hole.
Great.
So, show you one more thing here. All right, I guess I'll show you a little bit more of the back stitch or whip stitch, and then so it's like you're going backwards because you're jumping ahead to show where you want to go, but your stitch is behind you. It's the idea of it. Okay. So hopefully that's pretty clear how to do that one. And then, okay, I'll show you this other example. Right, so this one, I pinned down the hem, and then what I did is I sort of cheated because instead of doing all the extra basting on it ahead of time and doing extra stitching, I just pinned it down like this, and then I attached it as I laid it down on the jeans, and then as I was putting new pins in to hold it down onto the jeans leg, I just took out the inside pins that were underneath. Okay, so then it's just ready to stitch on it and have it be all finished on the edges and then attached onto the jeans. So I noticed you'll notice if you Google visible, repair, garment repair, visible garment repair, you will notice a lot of people get carried away with patching. Like they love patches, and so there's no rule to how many patches to put on and how you do them. So this one will just use a regular flat or running stitch. So that's probably easy for a lot of you. You can do it like the Sashiko method if you want, where you put a couple stitches on at once, but since it's kind of thick fabric, if you're using jeans, you may want to do one or two at a time. Okay, so that the key is too, you don't want to pull it too tight when you pull it through. And then if you're not comfortable just guessing where to put the stitches, you can mark on it. So you can use like kids chalk to mark on fabric, a white pencil, or you can buy, special marking pencils or chalks at the fabric store. Okay, so again, this would be either that you have a hole inside of the jeans, or maybe you just want to put some decorative patches on your clothes. That's another thing that I read a lot about, is people going to the thrift store and you buy something that looks kind of old and boring, and then you can decorate on it. So you don't have to be mending, you can just be decorating, or you can take old clothes that you don't like anymore, different things have issues with them, and then you could decorate on those and make them into something new. Or maybe you cut up parts of old clothes and then use that to sew into other clothes. Right, so with this one, I would just do this basting or running stitch all the way around. And then I thought it would be fun to have this size patch and then a smaller one that you could overlap on it like this. So that's upside down. So I was thinking to stitch this one on underneath and actually sew it on top of that one, because there's a lot of things you'll come across where people do layers, they're overlapping, they're on top of the other one, or things like that. So it would be fun if there was a place to see if people are able to try these things, to see examples of what people make. I don't know if the library has anything like that, where people could post what they're making.
Well, everyone's welcome to tag us on social media at
Oh,
LA
yeah.
County Library. Yeah, we'll take a look at those. So while you're doing the running stitch, can I ask some questions?
Mm-hmm.
So people are asking, do you recommend a sew-on patch or an iron-on patch, or is there a benefit of one to the other?
I think it just saves you time if you have the iron-on patch.
Oh, right,
Yeah.
right. Okay. And then we have a couple of questions about care and shrinkage and things.
Mm.
So what happens when the thread doesn't shrink in the same way the original fabric does after washing? And also a question about how to take care of clothing that has been patched up.
I wouldn't think there would be a problem with the thread. I haven't really heard about thread shrinking when you wash clothes. I haven't thought about that. So I think it should be okay. And then as far as care, if you use, this thread is pretty strong, the embroidery thread. And so I don't see why you'd have to treat it specially, unless you're worried about the fabric of on the patches fading or something. But I think it should be pretty strong.
Okay, great, thanks. And then that right now you're sewing on denim jeans,
Mm-hmm.
and the Pikachu and then the green, is that like a cotton material? What kind of material is
Mm-hmm.
that?
It's a cotton, yeah.
Okay, we had a question about that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you can choose any fabric. That's another fun thing that you'll see when you Google this topic is people use satin or silk, or you could use velvet or velour or something. That would be really pretty on the denim, or you think like a denim jacket using different silks, or like let's say with patterns, silk patterns, or yeah, or like a velvet or velour. So yeah, the fabric type doesn't really matter. I mean, I guess if you chose maybe like a rayon, which is like a really more delicate fabric, you could possibly worry about when you wash it, the fabric might get a little funky or something, but so you might want to consider that if you use that kind of fabrics. If you're choosing something like silk on denim, that could be possibly affect it when you wash it. So.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yes, so then I would just keep doing this stitch. Is there a certain stitch that anybody wants me to repeat, like blanket stitch or back stitch? Or
We just got a question about how do you turn the corner?
oh yeah, so okay, I was just going to do that.
Okay,
So
perfect.
yeah, I brought the stitch out here, and then now I'm just going to go under to see where I want to go to the next one. So I'll just start at the edge here. Yeah, so usually when you turn a corner, I mean, just remember you're making it to hold it down, but also the nice thing about stitches behind everything, no one's going to see it. So even if you end up making it look, for some reason, it doesn't look even inside, it's okay. So I just come up where I want to start my next row, and then I start stitching down. Actually, go this way. But yeah, it's going to be a little more awkward when you have the whole pants leg there. So maybe you have to put, like I just put my hand inside of the leg here. You maybe have to put your hand inside the leg to hold it there. And then another thing is the Sashiko stitching. They actually have a special thimble that they use because I guess you get stabbed with the needle a lot when you're stitching. So it's good to, I've never used a thimble though for sewing because I just kind of get used to needle poking me, and then I have a reflex where just move back quickly. So yeah, the denim is kind of hard to do that Sashiko method of grabbing a bunch of stitches at once. So maybe just do a couple, especially if you have a really long thread like mine, because it can get tangled and knotted up. So I would go all the way around, and then yeah, I would stitch this one on possibly then. So you want to be creative. And I was reading this article by some traditional Sashiko stitchers, and they were making the point, they said, first of all, we don't consider Sashiko to be an art. We consider it to be more like something like it's something that you do and you experience. And so I thought, well, I kind of like that idea, because it's like, it's more personal than you're trying to get enjoyment out of it. I mean, it's for a reason if you're patching something, but you're also doing it to get personal satisfaction out of it. And it's not so much about worrying about doing a certain method that has to be done. So, and then what you could do too with these is you could, I'll just show you with, ignoring that the back is going to be strange, but just to get to the middle of this quickly. Oops. Oh, I did something. Hold on a second. I forgot. I have to go back inside first. Okay. That is a good question though about the thread shrinking, because I never thought about that. And I know when you sew things, they don't, you pre-wash fabric, but you don't pre-wash thread. But I'm not sure with embroidery thread how that works if it shrinks. So it's a good question. Okay, I'm gonna go back to the inside. Almost done here. Go back to the inside, and then I'm going to come up in the center. So basically, this kind of garment repair didn't become an officially decorative thing or fashionable thing until the 70s. I don't know, some of you might remember, like I remember my mom in the 70s making this vest that she sewed patches on, and she sewed sequins on. She made like the sun out of it and everything. Sadly, of course, she donated it to Goodwill or something, but it was popular then, and then, you know, there was the punk movement made distressed fabrics popular, and then there's the 90s grunge, and then now people are, they're not so much, well, they are selling the distressed clothing look, but people are also combining that appeal with wanting to repair and reuse their clothes. So instead, then you can use your old clothes and you can add on to them and make them more the homemade look. So what I wanted to show you is on the outside, you know, then you could try that Oro method where you do little stitches, just however you want, you can create a pattern. So again, you're supposed to do the method similarly, you're supposed to pick up several pieces at once at least, which can help you keep it even. So let's say you wanted to create some kind of pattern, like I was going to do a diagonal line across and then more diagonal lines across. You could do something like that.
And doing that adds more strength to the
Yeah.
repair as well, right?
Mhm.
Okay. So we had some discussion about the thimble. Some people use it and some people don't, like yourself there.
Yeah, they have a Sashiko thimble that's flat and it's like a ring. So you wear it on your finger and then it's got this flat piece.
Oh, interesting.
So I'm just doing a random line here.
Awesome. We did have a request for another example of the blanket stitch. So
Okay.
Whenever you get a chance to do that one.
So I can switch back over here. Okay. So with this one, that was the back stitch, but back to the blanket stitch. You just go, it looks complex, but it's actually really simple. So you go to the next place that you want, you know, just like these, you want them to start at that spot. So you're going to go to the next spot and then your needle is going to go up to the edge there where you want to have the end of your blanket stitch be, right? So all you do is just remember to put your needle through the loop. Okay. It's like that. Okay, so again, I'm gonna pick where I want the stitch to start and then poke the needle up at the end of the patch, the side. And then after I bring it through, I'm gonna put the needle through the loop. Okay. Okay. So put it where you want to start it and bring it up here to the top. And then put your needle through the loop. Oops.
Now, does it matter if you go through the loop on the blanket stitch under or over, or just as long as you're consistent? Does it matter?
I'm not sure. I'm going to try that.
Okay.
Just, oops. Oh, of course. I noticed this thread really slips off easily, so you have to watch it. That doesn't get too short on that end. But luckily, the nice thing about these needles is the eye is really big on the needle, so it's pretty good for threading. Okay. Yeah, okay. I'll try that one more time. Okay, so I'm putting it here. Let's see. Yeah, I don't think it matters. I think it's, yeah. I think I did it the opposite. So it should be okay. I guess just experiment, but I'm pretty sure that it should be okay to do it either way.
Great. And we have some experienced menders on the chat. And
Okay.
one of them is recommending having, especially when working with denim or really thick fabric, having a pair of flat nose pliers in order to yank up that needle through multiple fabrics. So
That's a good idea.
that might be something people might want to add to their kit as well. Now, with the Sashiko needle that you're using, it has a big eye, but are there different sizes as well, or is it just sort of
let me show you
one?
I think so. I got this tube. That's what they were in, and I think they're all the same. But let's see, maybe not. That seems like they should have some different ones. But I feel like they look pretty much the same. They're the same length, and yeah.
Okay, and they're very similar to embroidery needles as well.
Yeah, or upholstery, I think.
Okay.
I think I noticed embroidery needles are smaller. I don't think the eye is as big, so they were also suggesting upholstery too.
Oh, okay.
So I do, on the last slide, I have links, but that'll be accessible for if you want to look up some of these pages again. I found some really great resources on there.
Oh, right. Yes. So just so everyone knows, I'm going to get that list of links of resources from Catherine, and I'll put it in the email that we send out next week as a follow-up.
Okay. Are we doing questions now, or should we?
Well, I've been kind of doing a lot of them as we went along.
Yeah, true.
Someone did ask if you could go through the backstitch once again.
Sure.
Would that be okay?
Yeah.
And someone is asking, that green fabric that you're making for the patch, is that from anything in particular? Someone loves the design. So
yeah,
asking if
I thought I saw that. I was like, this is going to be popular because it's so popular, and I love this kind of like plants and things. I just went to the fabric store, and they sell all these bunches of pieces of fabric, and I got several different fun patterns, but they're rolled up like this. So this is one of them that was in the package of like 4.
Oh, so they're like fat quarters, like
yeah, these were not called fat quarters. They had some other name, but
okay.
It's in that area. So yeah, and then nobody asked about the Pikachu, but I got that on eBay.
Okay.
I was gonna make that during COVID. I was gonna make masks, and then I got some cute fabrics. I got like that one and this one, and I did not end up making the masks. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna use them now. So, all right, so I'll do the back stitch again. So back stitch, you're going to just pick your next spot to start here. And then again, same thing, you go under, and then you just pick where you want the fabric to, or excuse me, the thread to come out. And then, oops, let's pull that through. So the Sashiko thread is, I think it's cotton, so it might be less fraying like this is, or I don't know what you would call when it's coming apart, splitting apart like this. For some reason, I don't know if it's this batch of embroidery thread, but it's really doing that a lot.
Yes, that's what someone in the chat said who has used Sashiko before. They said the Sashiko thread is really easy to use and is less tangly.
Yeah,
that's a phrase.
Well, I actually had bought some Sashiko thread, and we have a puppy in our house right now, and I honestly think he stole it because he's been taking a lot of stuff. So I've looked everywhere and I can't find it. It's really strange. So I'm thinking I bet he took it. So sadly, I can't show it to you, but if you look online, you'll see it's thin. It's a little thinner than this. Yeah, and it's more stable than embroidery thread. But I figured most people would be using embroidery thread anyway, so this would be better. Well, if I pull that, see, I pulled that a little tight, and then that resolved that looping there. So you could do that if you have to. maybe since we have extra time, I'll just quickly show you a couple other examples, but I'll do a little bit more of the back stitching first.
And while you're doing that, I'll just sort of answer one of these chat questions about, is it possible to not show the stitches on the outside? And I just want to refer you back to sort of our first program as well, because that was a lot of the more invisible type of mending. And this today's was focusing more on the visible mending side. But but we kind of went through some of the ways that you could mend by not showing so many of the stitches.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think I need to clip this thread because it's not staying together. So another thing, in clothing class, just like my computer students, I tell them you have to learn patience from all these things. It's definitely a patience lesson, but I like this method because it's more fun. I do not know why this doesn't want to flatten out. Okay. I might just do it. I'll do it on a different one just to show you here when the needle is not going to do this. Let's see. I wanted to show you a couple examples. Maybe I'll do this. I'll go back and show you a couple examples quickly of the various stitches. So I might have to zoom in a little. Let's see. So this is how you can fold it under, pin it, hem it with a simple stitching. So here's the running stitch. You can also do a really tight whip stitch. So the whip stitch, I guess, is actually straighter than the back stitch. It is a dense straight stitch. And then you can also put fabric on the inside where the hole is, like a decorative fabric. And then you can sew those stitches around the outside. Or again, you can do that whip stitch here. Just fun ways of doing the patches. Okay.
We had a quick question about sort of like, let's say you had a pair of jeans and then you put the green cotton on top of it, like at the knee part. And then what's the best way to make sure that that is durable as, people bend and use the, is it to do extra stitching on it or?
Yeah, you could do extra stitching, or you could just put another layer behind it of maybe ideally like a denim or.
Oh, to layer it, to give it more stability. Okay.
Just do more layers of that fabric or the denim.
Okay. And can you show knotting it at the end, and what's the best way of doing that to make sure it stays secure?
Okay, so let me just start over here. So knotting it. Knotting the end of it. I thought you were saying making a knot. Okay, by the way, I didn't mention about making a knot so quickly.
We'll do both sides.
Yeah, so you're gonna do this, and then, you hold on to the end. And sorry, there's a slight delay with my camera right now. You wrap it around your index finger, and then you roll it between your fingers, and then pull it off. As you pull it with your nail, you get the knot. Okay, it takes a little practice, but again, if you get frustrated, you can just, if you have to, you can tie the knot yourself. You could just take two pieces and tie them like this, like a little kid. Okay, so maybe thread your needle and then just do that if you have to, but that would be, that's for a double. So if it was single, you just tie it on the single thread, right? Okay. All right, so I'll just cut this. Let's see. Go to this one. Okay, so with any of these, you're going to knot it at the end the same way. And threading a needle right now. Okay. So strange that it's suddenly giving me trouble now. Why is it doing this? Okay.
Well, of course, when you're on camera.
Yeah.
Right.
What is going on?
So how do you determine the number of thread and the type of thread to use? Is it based on the fabric and the patch?
Well, with all of these, they recommend the embroidery thread, or you can use the Sashiko thread.
Okay.
And I wouldn't use thinner thread because it's not going to be strong enough. Okay, so I got this one to thread. So with any of these, when you're done, you just push the needle back through to the back. And then in the back, you're going to, now this one actually went over the patch, see, so, but that's okay. You don't want to pick up a lot of fabric because you don't want it to show too much on the other side. So just a little bit of it, or if you can pick up mostly fiber that's on this side. And then as you come through, again, you're going to put your needle through that loop. Okay. And then just do that usually at least twice. And then you can even, the next one, you can pick up some of that thread to stitch through. And then just tighten that down. Okay.
Well, that is great. And that's like a great way to end it, is to show how to end the
Okay.
stitch, because we're about out of time. So yeah, we use it all the time. Thank you so much, Catherine, for answering all of our questions along the way as well. And I just want to mention that if anyone's interested in our other programs, you want to visit us at lacountylibrary.org.
I think just remember to have fun with it, and hopefully, you know, your family will want to get involved. Family and friends will get inspired by you, and you can do it together. So hope you enjoy it.